begins in 3, 2, 1.
I started working in Newport by chance. My cousin Dana, she had worked there, Dana Beard. She goes with Dana Daniels on the radio after that, but she had worked there for a couple of years, and I thought she had the coolest job ever. As a teenage kid, I listened to KOKR especially. Grew up listening to Dale Turner, Michael Steele, and Michael J. Steele, and Bud Black, and they were kind of heroes and celebrities. But she suggested one time, I was probably 15 years old, you should go get a job at the radio station. And I thought she was crazy. She said, well, you like music, and that'd be a great job, or you like to talk a lot. And I was really shy at the time, though. So she taught me into going out there, 15 years old. At that time, they had not hired a 15-year-old kid. And Mr. Al Evans was the guy who hired me. He told me I was the first 15-year-old kid he had hired. He said he saw something in me. Of course, at 15, I didn't see that. But he said he saw something real special in me and thought I should give this career a try. So he hired me, dumped me off with Michael J. Steele, and he was my first program director. He told me how things would work out. And at the time, I thought, this was the coolest job in the world. Back then, it was still, I think, part of the golden age of radio. We still had, turntables. Michael J. Steele told me you can bring your own vinyl to work with you. So I was bringing, my vinyl, Led Zeppelin and Iron Maiden and things like that. He probably got his butt chewed a lot the next day after I worked playing some of this stuff. But we worked from 4 o'clock in the afternoon after school. And back then, we would sign off. It wasn't a 24-hour deal. We would sign off at 11 o'clock Monday through Thursday, at midnight on Friday and Saturday, and then I think it was maybe 9 o'clock on Sunday. And I worked Monday night initially, and had this moniker, the Monday Night Maniac, and played all this rock and roll and stuff, and just had a good time. I didn't get to work with Mr. Al very long. It wasn't long after he hired me when he sadly passed away. He was a huge celebrity, though. When I came there, everybody knew Mr. Al Evans, and I always called him Mr. Al. But he was just famous in that region. Everybody knew him, knew that voice. To this day, I still think Mr. Al had one of the richest, most pure, natural radio voices I've ever heard, and it was just magic. But this is a guy, when I heard him speak in person, I was just in awe. But sadly, did not get to work with him that long. And like I said, he said he saw something special in me, and I'll never be able to repay that debt. His family still holds a great deal of meaning to me in my heart. I worked with Dale Gardner until I left, and he was just a great general manager, one of the best natural salespeople I ever met in radio. And one thing I can say about Dale Gardner is, I don't think I've ever met any basketball play-by-play guy that does it better than him. He could do baseball and basketball all by himself and was just awesome at it. And so I always thought the world of Dale. I really grew up under Dale's tutelage. He looked after me, gave me lots of great advice. He was real strict sometimes, but we needed that back then. We were young and coming up, but he had lots of great advice, and he was just a good guy to work for. I got to work with some really, really good people. Michael J. Steele, like I said, was my very first program director. I thought he was the coolest guy in the world. Just the way he held himself, the way he was on the radio. He was as funny off the air as he was on the air. What you saw on, or what you heard on the radio was exactly what Michael J. was off the radio. And that was the first time I'd ever encountered something like that. I'll never forget, he wanted me to learn every aspect of the radio business that he could teach me. He knew a lot of it. So the first time I had a chance to do this was on a Saturday morning. I started working when I was 15 years old, so I had a driver's permit. So my mom or my dad will always take me out to work, usually my mom, because she didn't want me driving without a licensed driver. So that Saturday morning, he said, be here about 5:30, and I'm going to teach you how to sign on. So Mom gets up early, drives me out to the radio station. 5:30 rolls around. I'm out there just nervous. I've never done this before, but Michael J's going to be there. He's going to help me out. 5:45, Michael J hasn't shown up. Mom gets a little nervous. I'm already nervous, and she asked me, what do we do if Michael J doesn't show up? I don't know. 5:55 rolls around, still no Michael J. I know we have to go on at 6 o'clock. Well, I had remembered that the window in the newsroom never locked, and so I had no key to get in because I had not been there long enough to have a key to get in yet. I was still training. And so I went around the back of the radio station, climbed in through the newsroom, through the window, landed on my face on the floor. And I had been around Dale Turner and Michael J. enough to know the structure of the news and how it went and how to get on the air. So I went to the old AP wire and pulled the news off the order I thought I went into, and went back and knew how to turn the transmitters on because I had turned them off. I just did it in reverse order. And more or less signed on by myself and just got us on the air, got the music rolling. And back then on Saturday mornings, we did the 7:30 news and the 9:30 news. The 9:30 news was always the popular news because they had the obituaries, it was longer newscasts. Did all of that. About 10 o'clock, Michael J. calls the radio station. And I'm by this point just running on adrenaline. I'm freaking out. I can't believe I've survived to this point. And he lets me know, hey, did a good job. Where have you been? He said, I just knew you could do it. I wasn't even worried about it. Like it was a test. I still think he slept in that day, but he swears it was just a test. But I passed that test. But that was Michael J. though. That's just how he was. And another great guy I worked with was Bud Black, and Bud Black taught me so much that he probably didn't know in his lifetime. He taught me when I was just a punk kid coming in. We would come in about 3:30 when we get out of school, about 3:15 or so, and then I would get to work at 3:30, and we'd start working at 4. He would come in between 4 and 5 to record the afternoon sports, and so I knew I had to get a 5.5 minute cart, erase it, pop it in, and record his sports. He'd always come in and talk to me. He always had something positive to say, something to boost my confidence, because he could tell I was nervous and just doing the best I could. And I came in one day, and he had left me some commercial copy for It's Fairway. I had never done a commercial yet, and I didn't know what to do. And I asked him, I said, what do you want me to do with this? He said, well, just come up with something really, really cool and make a 30-second commercial, and then leave it for me. I'll listen to it in the morning. And I was just terrified. So I did a bunch of stupid voices. I used to do cartoon voices a lot. I did Scooby-Doo, the Tasmanian Devil, whatever it was, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I did something and made a copy out of that for the It's Fairway commercial. So I'm really nervous to go home that night, and you don't really sleep well. I get up the next morning thinking, it's probably going to kick back to me or whatever. On the way to school that morning, I flipped with the radio station, listened to the AM Update, which is the morning show, and the commercial's playing. I almost ran off the road. I just couldn't believe it. So after school, I went to work, and Bud comes in. Hey, you did a great job. I want to make sure you do this from now on. So from that point on, that's how I learned how to write copy for one, record ads, be creative for another. But he always did stuff like that. And he was always just really supportive, and he would come by a lot at night just to see if everything was okay. I'd be working, 9:30. I remember one time he came in, and I was running the board and doing my show and reading a Stephen King book, reading Pet Sematary. He walked in, opened the door, and I screamed like a girl, just fell on the floor. And he said, "Oh, I've read that book. I don't blame you for doing that." But that's just who Bud was. Bud was just a great guy, Dale Turner was just awesome. Like I said, I've got a second family working with the radio station. He wasn't really like a dad to me. He was like the older, cooler brother I always wish I had. He did lots of things I thought was cool. He was a musician. He played guitar like nobody's business. He could sing really well. Has one of the best voices I ever heard in radio. He was a brilliant news guy. He could report news, and he sounded great in the air. And we did a morning show together for many, many years. Did the AM Update, because that was the coolest thing. When I got to be a program director, I got to get in that role that my heroes had been in. I got to be the co-host of the AM Update, which was what Michael J. Bud and Dale Turner did. All of a sudden, it was me and Dale Turner. And that, to me, was the coolest thing in the world. I did that for many years with Dale Turner. And it wasn't like we had a straight guy and then a funny guy. We were both funny at the same time. Sometimes we'd both be straight and, do play off each other. We always knew what the other was going to say, and that was kind of a cool thing to do. But off the mic, we got to be really good friends. He gave lots of great advice to me, a lot of relationship advice, and he got me hooked on lots of geek culture. He turned me on to Brian Lumley books. He would listen to certain music I hadn't discovered yet and turned me into that. Introduced me to legendary people like Sonny Burgess. He would drive by the radio station. Didn't realize how cool Sonny Burgess was until Dale Turner introduced me to him. And he was just a cool guy. Got to meet Billy Riley with him. We got to do lots of things outside the radio station. We got to do several wrestling events where we got to be ringside announcers and take care of the bell. And one of the coolest things that Dale Turner and I had ever done, Jerry Lawler, who is a WWE Hall of Famer now, he came to town. They were doing a promotion with the the grocery store in town at the time, and they had bought advertising into us, and we were going to do a remote there that day from 11 to 1. Well, usually I worked from 6 o'clock in the morning and stayed on there till 1. This way replaced me at 1. My friend Brad George worked there at the time. He took over at 1. Well, that morning on the AM update, I spent all morning big talking what I was going to do to Jerry Lawler when he come to town. I was going to slap the Tasmanian toe twister on him, the Kookaburra King Killer. I was going to run Jerry Lawler out of town. He'd never come back to Newport ever again. And come down for the remote, Dale Turner goes over there. He calls back the radio station and lets me know Jerry Lawler was listening this morning. And I didn't know that. You know, I thought he was messing with me. He said, Lawler is listening this morning. He is not happy with you. I thought he was still just yanking my chain. And so lunchtime rolls around, and I'm tossing it back and forth to him to the remote. Brad comes in, and he says he's going to go over and see Jerry Lawler and get his autograph. I said, well, you know, give me an autograph while you're over there. So he brings back this picture, which I still have. I wish I brought it with me, but it's a picture of Jerry Lawler. It says to Heath, bring it on, Jerry the King Lawler. And so then I started thinking, okay, maybe he was being serious about this. And so when Brad brings this to me, he said, Dale Turner wanted me to tell you to come over and join him for the last break of this remote because Jerry Lawler wants to see you. And so it's starting to really hit me at this point. Something bad may happen here. So I get to the remote, and Jerry's sitting back signing his autographs and stuff behind the cash registers, and everybody's lined up. Dale Turner's over on this side with a microphone. And when I woke up, Dale says, that's him right there. And Lawler gets up and throws his chair across the grocery store like he's mad. And it makes everybody in the store stop. You can hear a pin drop. And he runs over and gets right in my face. He's not a real tall guy. He's about as tall as I am. But gets right in my face, and I just turn white as a ghost. And he tells me, he says, I listen to you, Big Mouth. He said, I have seen more guts on the skeleton. You have got a face for radio, which I do. And all I can think is, I'm getting dissed by Jerry the King Lawler. What in the world is going on here? But I really thought he was fixing to just pile drive me right in the store. And, of course, he's doing all this while we're on the air. I didn't notice it, but Dale's got the microphone right under me. We're on the air live doing all this. So we get off the air, and Jerry passed me on the back and everything. He said, man, I appreciate you helping us out this morning. You got a big crowd here today. And I'm like, whoa. And Dale Turner said, you thought he was really going to kill you, didn't you? I said, no, I didn't. But I did. I really did. But that was the cool thing at working Dale Turner. We got to do cool things like that. Yeah. One of the nice things working at the radio station in Newport, I made lifelong friends, you know, the people I've mentioned, but a guy who's just like my brother is Grant Carey. In fact, I hired him there in the mid-'90s. And then I came to work in Searcy for Quick 99.9, been here for over 14 years, and Grant works here now. So we've been together for many, many years. But briefly, Dale Turner, he was not doing the morning show. And so Grant got to do it with me, and so we got to go do remote. We didn't do many live AM updates in places, but we did this one at the McDonald's, and that was kind of a something new, something cool. But you know, we actually broadcast from the McDonald's there in Newport on the corner, and did the AM update from there. And it was nice to do that. And I think Gardner ran the board for us, and so that was kind of weird having the boss back running the board. We're out there just running around and, you know, acting foolish and eating Egg McMuffins. That's what we're doing. You know, with the boss is back there taking care of the business for us, and that was kind of cool. One thing about that building is you probably, I mean, you know, it's not a great building. It wasn't that great when we worked there. We always had flooding problems. And before we were 24 hours, even after we were 24 hours, we would come in 5:30 in the morning and get together because we go on the air at 6 o'clock to start the show and everything. But when you'd walk in, you could smell the aroma of black mold just growing. But you would step into the control room and hear squish. And so you knew the water had got to that point. So we had a trough that ran behind what we called the rack. They used to carry there used to be a series of what we called carousels. And you put commercials on carts that looked like 8-track tapes. If you're old enough to remember 8-track tapes, that's what it looked like. And so when they did away with the carts and went to just computers and CDs and stuff like that, they left the rack there. Behind the rack was a trough. They had all the wires. We had a little sump pump, and you take that, put that down in that trough with all those wires now, with all the water there, and I hope you didn't electrocute yourself and die. And we would take a hose and put it out the back window and pump the water back out, which would tell you in about an hour that water comes right back in again. So you do this all day long. It was just, it was never ending. It was an infinite loop of water coming in and going out. But the only thing worse than the water was the lightning. If you got in that building when there was lightning, the lightning would dance around the building. I remember one time when we first got computers, we were going to upgrade and get computers. We got on the internet, and we're going to just join the new millennium. This was probably in the late 90s, 98 maybe. We'd had the computers for like one day, and a big lightning storm came up. So I'm on the air trying to cover the storm. There's a thunderstorm warning, and when lightning hit that building, it would go from socket to socket. You could watch lightning bolts travel across the room, and occasionally come out of the microphone and zap you right in the mouth. And did that while I was on the air. It's all you can do not to say a word the FCC would fine you for, because you're getting zapped in the mouth. But lightning would just scare you to death in that building. You'd be in there just watching lights just fly everywhere, just lightning balls. I remember that day specifically, we wiped out every computer we bought. Had to go buy new computers all over again. So that was our introduction to the computer age. We had one day that went down, had to buy a new one. So I got to know Sonny Burgess working at the radio station, and as a young kid like that, I didn't realize what a big legend Sonny Burgess was. I knew a lot about Sun Records, but didn't really know much about Sonny. He would come in a lot of time and talk to Dale Turner. They had a gospel group together at Stranger's Home. They played around here a lot. But Sonny would come in, just talk to us, hang out with us. I thought he was just a cool guy. And then he came in one day. I've always been a big fan of Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, and Page and Plant had done a couple of albums together at that time, reformed their twosome. And Sonny had come in to tell me that he was going to Montreux to the Jazz Festival because a couple of guys wanted to record one of his songs. He wasn't sure he was going to let them. I asked him who it was. He said, well, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page. Like, yeah, sure you are, And so after he left, I asked Dale Turner, I said, is he serious? He goes, oh, yeah. I said, he's going over to Montreux. And I said, yeah, about the Page and Plant thing? He said, probably. Yeah. So a couple of weeks roll by, and Sonny comes back in the radio station, has a framed picture in his hand. He said, hey, I got you something. I said, what is it? He handed me this framed picture, and it's a picture of him between Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. And I'm just freaking out. I said, where did you get this? He said, Montreux. He said, the little boys, they taught me into it. They're going to do a Sun tribute album. They're going to do Bucket's Got a Hole in It. And I was just flabbergasted. I said, so you got this picture of me? He goes, yes, I thought you'd appreciate that. So somewhere in all my collection of great pictures and memories, I have a picture of Sonny Burgess, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, that probably nobody else in the world has ever seen. But that was just when I realized, this guy's cool. Yeah, the radio station in Newport has a ghost. I'm sure it's still there, but I didn't know this until I started working there. I named the ghost affectionately Paul the Poltergeist. We're not sure if it's a male or female. We assume it's male. It was kind of a rite of passage. You came to work at the radio station, you had to be told the story of Paul the Poltergeist. And you experienced weird things there. I'm not sure if it was, RF or what, but you had weird things happen, especially if you worked late at night or you signed on early in the morning. Most of my activities came early in the morning. I worked Sunday mornings at the radio station. I was the only person there. And you would have things like an ink pen. You would lay your ink pen down somewhere, and you'd go to another room, to the newsroom, to get the news off the AP wire, and you come back, your pen was gone. Well, after you'd been there a while, the ghost didn't scare you. You just knew it was playful. So you have to think, where's the one room I have not been in? You go to that room, and that's where that pen would be. You had things like that. We had things where, at that time, we had 4 different phone lines, and they would light up when somebody was on the phone. You'd be sitting in the control room and look down, and line 4 would be lit up. But you weren't on the phone. Walk around the building, and somewhere in the building, there's a phone laying off the hook on that desk. Nobody's in the building other than you. Somebody picked up the phone, put it off the hook, and that's why it was all like that. There was many a time you would sit at the control board in the control room, and you notice at the corner of your eye, back in the transmitter room, there was somebody back there with a white shirt, white t-shirt, white polo, something, just standing there. You turn around and look, and they were gone. I worked with a guy one time before I was the program director there. Came into work after school that day, and he was really upset at me. He said, I don't appreciate what you did this morning. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, you were here this morning and tried to scare me. I said, no. I said, what are you talking about? It's 5:30 this morning, you're sitting at that counter out there wearing a white shirt and blue jeans. I said, 5:30 this morning, I was still in bed asleep. But he would have swore that I was sitting out there in a white shirt and blue jeans. So I wasn't the only person that saw Paul. I had a couple of part-time employees. They got so scared of the ghost and the ghost story that they quit. In fact, I had one girl, she had actually called and said, I'm not going back to the radio station. We went up to that night, and she was sitting in the parking lot, refused to go back in because she had ghost activity. So there was a little haunting there, and I'm sure the ghost never left that area. So that was what was interesting for sure.
Our thought for today is because you ask not to.
If you watched any television in the 1970s, 1980s, you might be familiar with a program called the Little BREADCAST. Back in the day, when TV stations and radio stations went off the air at midnight or whenever they went off the air, they would conclude their broadcast day in this area by playing something called the Little BREADCAST. The gentleman's name was Mr. Cecil Guthrie. He had a little 5-minute devotional that always played at sign-off. And on the television, you had video slides that went with it, just images and pictures. But on the radio, it was just a spoken word testimonial. It was just something, it was kind of like Paul Harvey almost. If you're familiar with Paul Harvey, it was very Paul Harvey-ish. He has some really great stories, like on the similarities between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. But it always had a biblical twist at the end. It brought it back to the devotional. And I got to work with Mr. Cecil Guthrie in the mid-90s. He had actually came in. At that time, all of his programs for the radio were on carts. But he was trying to upgrade and put them all off on cassettes because that was the new thing. In fact, CDs had come in by this point. But for this thing, he wanted to be on a cassette and take those to TV stations and radio stations throughout the area. And he used this in stations in Arkansas, Missouri, and I think Tennessee as well, maybe some others, but I know for those three for sure. And so he tasked me with taking all of his original recordings and putting those on cassettes. He had a mass cassette recorder we could do this on. So I spent many hours doing this for him. But anybody who worked in radio at the time, worked in TV, if you heard the cue that said, program begins in 3, 2, 1, that was my voice. That was my my addition to the Little BREADCAST. I got to do that, and I took great pride in that. Mr. Cecil Guthrie was a great guy. He was a real nice guy. But even when we went 24 hours, I made sure to keep that particular program part of our on-air programming. So when I would come in the morning at 6 to start our actual broadcast day, when I went on the air, I would come on, give the time and temperature, mention what's coming up in the news, take about 30 seconds and say, but first, here's the Little BREADCAST of Mr. Cecil Guthrie. And we would start each broadcast day at 6 a.m. with a 5-minute devotional from him, the Little BREADCAST. And that's the way it went up until I left the radio station there. I think what I really took away from that job was the way I was able to work with the public, working with people. Jackson County, the surrounding areas, you know, for one, I was born and raised just outside of Newport, about 20 miles outside of Newport. So these people, you know, they're, lack of a better phrase, they're my people, and I knew who they were, they knew who I was, and so it was not a big deal to, you know, go down to the Roadrunner, get gas, and people walking in, hey, I heard your bad joke of the week this week. It was bad, you know, things like that. Or, you know, when the Niners would win, they come in, pat me on the back when they lost. I got a lot of razzing about that, and it's like having a big extended family. Where you went, people knew who you were, and to me, that was the best part of radio. And I try to bring that with me wherever I go. When I left Newport and came to work in Searcy, I have a lot of that here too. I take great pride in that. I love people. I love connecting with people. It makes it feel like a family. It's not just a job. It never has been. Bud Black taught me so much about copywriting for commercials, and I had a great love for sports anyway, but he didn't realize he was teaching me how to do sports in the radio, but I listened to him and his broadcast and learned a lot. I do color commentating for the Searcy Line football team on the radio, and there's a lot of times I've had to do play-by-play. And the first time I did that, I was really terrified, but I sat down and asked myself before I did it that night, what would Bud Black do? And so I was able to channel a lot of what Bud Black did. And L.V. Wilson's a guy I worked with for years, and he's one of the greatest play-by-play guys just right next to Bud Black. And so I could channel the guy I was actually working with at the time, along with the guy that I always admired coming up with. But Michael J. Steele, he was another guy I looked up to because, like I said, he was so charismatic, he was funny, and he had just such a presentation on the radio. And he's the same way today on the radio. He works in Jonesboro for the Wolf, and if you ever listen to him, he is just as funny now as he was back then. And that's the way he is in real life. He's not a fake person. And I always try to model myself after people like that. You know, I don't try to be fake on the air, but what you hear on the air is exactly who I am if you meet me in person. I may be a little shyer, but that's exactly who I am. And I miss turntables. I like to think I came up into radio at the very tail end of the golden age, because when I first started, Michael Steele was my first program director, and he had told me, when you work your show at night, here's the playlist, but there's certain things during the hour, there's gaps where you can play what you want to. And so I would bring my vinyl from home, and we had 2 turntables set up to the right of us, and I loved, you know, I could hold that needle exactly where it's supposed to be held and talk and let it go and start the song. I mastered that within a week or 2 working there. That was just a skill that some people have no idea what I'm talking about, much less how to do that skill, but nothing like the sound of vinyl. There's just not. I miss that aspect of it. There's a lot of things computers made better, but when computers don't work, then you're kind of out there twisting in the wind. So there's a lot of things about the old live radio that do not exist now. There's just no way it could. Probably one of my favorite times, he would hate me tell this story. Like I said, I'm a huge 49er fan, so he did like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before Tom Brady ever went there, and he's not a bandwagon fan. So his team was never in the playoffs, so he liked the Cowboys too. So we had a lot of Cowboys-Niners rivalries, and my 49ers would always choke against the Falcons. And back then, the Falcons were in the NFC West. And he had made this bet with me that if the Falcons swept us that year, I have to eat my hat on the air. And I was so determined that the Niners would not do that, I agreed to that bet. And they did not get swept that year. We won one, they won one, so the hat was safe. So the next year, that would be the '94 season, the year we went to the Super Bowl. And we beat the Cowboys to get there. He was all upset about that. And he said, there is no way the Niners won the Super Bowl. I said, okay, we'll make a bet. We do this on the air now, so everybody's witness of it. If the Niners win, he has to wear my 49er hat for an entire week. And back then, when Dale got off the air doing the AM update, he was a salesperson. So he went out, plus he was a news guy too. So, and I picked out the nicest 49er hat I had. It was nice, red and white Zubaz. I mean, if you know what Zubaz is, that was the height of fashion back in the early 90s. So he was going to wear the ugliest hat I had for a week. And the Niners played the Chargers that year in the Super Bowl and just demolished them by 20-some-odd points. And so that Monday morning, I came into work all excited. I had my camcorder set up on the side of the control board, waiting for Dale Turner to walk in and accept his fate. And he came in late. He did not show up. And I thought he just stiffed me. About 7:30, 7:40, he came in and claimed he overslept. I know he just wanted to face his fate. But he put that hat on, and he wore that hat. He lost that bet fair and square, and yeah, he fessed up to it. But that was a lot of fun. I miss days like that. Like I said, the crew I worked with were really great. I miss working with Gene Evans because she was kind of like a second mom, and so I've got a really great mom. I got a bonus mom with her. I would go to work, and she made sure I walked the line. You know, if she knew I was having problems with something, you know, she would talk it out with me. She was one of those people. She would come in and ask you how you're doing, and she meant it. You know, when I started working full time as the program director, I got there before she did. And so I'd been there since 5 that morning. She rolled at 8 o'clock. But usually the first thing she did, she'd come in the morning and tell me good morning. And I know every day was not a good day for her, but she always had a smile on her face. But she walked in and said, good morning. And then she said, how are you doing today? And if she asked you how you're doing, she expected an answer. And she was concerned about how you were. And some of my roughest days I got through thanks to her, you know. Dale Gardner was a great guy to work for. He was a brilliant salesman. He was a great basketball play-by-play guy. He did basketball by himself and did it like nobody else. He did the same thing in baseball too. But there was a lot of times he let that stony facade down, and he'd be concerned about how you're doing. You know, he was a family. You know, and we all cared for each other. Really did. When I first started working there, I mean, smoking was a lot cooler than it is now. It wasn't the un-PC thing to do, and the guys, they would smoke in the studio or on the air, but the edict came down one day, and no more smoking in the building. Of course, for this time, the walls were already browned, and it was clear that they had smoked in that building way too long. So they made the guys who smoked, they had to go out back and smoke out the back door. or smoke out the front door. And the front door is the radio station. They've never been in good shape, and they had taken some tin they put across the bottom because they were real weathered, and they painted it up and everything. But when they put the tin on, they didn't, I guess, seal it up very well. And one day, Dale Turner had gone out to smoke a cigarette out front, and he had come back in and got back on the air or whatever. And a couple hours later, Miss Jean comes in and tells me she smells smoke, and she's concerned. And next thing I do, I smell smoke, and it smells awful. Next thing we see is smoke building up outside the window out there, out the front door. There's little tiny windows in the front door. So we think there's something on fire out there. Maybe the ash can is on fire. So we go outside. It's fine. And look, and the door is on fire. He had flipped a cigarette butt, wind caught it, and it got between the tin and the door and caught the door on fire. And so, I mean, how do you put a door out like that? So we went and we had a coffee pot, and we emptied it out, put water, and then just poured water down the door until we got the smoke out of it. That was a nice creative stink that we had for about 3 or 4 days in the building there. That was lovely, yeah. That station's always been part of that community. I would say the heart of the community. If you grew up like I did listening to that station, I know as a kid I listened to Rock 103 a lot, but I also listened to KOKR and KNBY. And, you know, being a local station like that, that was how we got our information. You know, there was no internet back then. You had the newspaper, sure. You had the Democrat, at that time just Arkansas Democrat. You had the Arkansas Gazette. You had the Newport Daily Independent and the Jonesboro Sun. My dad would get papers and read them all the time. But if you wanted instant news, you listen to KNBY-KOKR. You listen to what Dale Turner had to say. You listen to Bud to get the sports. And that's what we did every morning before we went to school. On our way to school, we listened to AM Update. And I think once you progress so far and you start taking the local out of the radio and you make it where it's just canned music, what's the point? If you want to do that, I've got Spotify on my phone. I can listen to Spotify and get the same satisfaction, if not more, because I can pick my own music. So I think when you take away all that from the community, I think they notice it. Maybe not subconsciously, but you know they do know there's something not right. It doesn't feel right. If you listen to it, it doesn't sound right. There's something wrong with it. You can't quite put your finger on it. You know, for years, everybody has known, you know, KNBY-KOKR, that's the home of the Greyhounds, you know, Greyhound football. You know, that's what you associate with that station. You knew it's a place to get your local news. Well, now you got your phone now, and you can get all the news you want off of Facebook or whatever. So you know, there's a lot of progress. It's not a good progress, and I think that's part of it. I think you took the local out of that, and with the closing, I think that just kind of encapsulates everything that's kind of gone wrong with where we are now in our society. I really do. When I pass that building, it's sad, you know. And to be honest, I try not to go by the building a lot because it's sad, you know. It's just sad. Well, I think that goes back to what I was saying about everything being local, but they made local a big deal. You know, it was a big deal. I know some people, they would have, you know, things to sell in the trading post. You know, that time of day, that was what we called appointment listening. Okay, you knew, well, when I was there, we did the trading post at 6:25 in the morning. You did it at 12:25 in the afternoon. That's appointment listening because, you know, they had a garage sale or they had a goat for trade or something like that. People listen to that, you know, and you think, well, that's so ridiculous. Why would you do that? Well, that was an important thing. That was appointment listening. You knew at that time every day you had to listen to that. It was just, you know, it made a big deal out of something that was small. It made local important, and it is important to those people. It's important to me. I took it very seriously when I would get on and read, you know, and have silly things like, you know, Joe Blow has got a goat he'd like to trade for a boat. You know, I took that seriously because to that guy that was serious. You know, a lot of people listening laughing at. We did things like radio bingo, and that's something that you won't hear on radio probably ever again. And that was just fun. You would sit there, and one of the best things that came out of working for the radio station in Newport is the friendship I have with Grant Carey. He's just like one of my probably a true brother, and he works with me here in Searcy. But we would sit together, in that little tiny AM room, and we do radio bingo every day from 12:30 to 1. And you got two guys who are, broad shoulders sitting in that little room side by side. It's literally being in the trenches, and you become close whether you want to or not. You become friends, and you're sitting there trying to make jokes just to have a good time because it's something as silly as bingo. B15. I wish I could be B15 again. Things like that. Just total cornball radio. But listeners loved it. They loved to call in and say, "Hey, I've got bingo." And then you check their card. Sure enough, they win money. That was appointment listening too. They 12:30 on the AM 1280, radio bingo, and that was just something cool. But it's things that I don't ever see coming back to radio ever again, and I hate that. Well, I would tell all of our listeners, thank you first of all, because I don't think they ever knew how much it meant. To know they're listening, because to me this has never been a job. This is what I do. It's kind of who I am. I hate that I have to define myself that way, but it's who I am. But it started there, and the listeners are the biggest part of it. If you don't have any listeners, you're talking to yourself. You talk to yourself, they think you're crazy. Especially if you answer yourself. But the listeners we had, they were great. Like I said, if you went out in the public somewhere, people knew who you were. I never got in this business wanting to be famous. Probably more infamous than famous. I didn't ever do that. That's not the reason I got in there. I got in this because I love music first and foremost, and I love people. And I discovered doing this job just what kind of good people there are out there, and in that area, those listeners, and some of those listeners I still have now, and it was very touching. At Christmas a lot, or my birthday, they would show up and bring, a cake or a bag of donuts or something like that. We had listeners that would show up on Friday mornings and bring us donuts every week. We just counted it like clockwork. And, you just have no idea what that meant to me. You can't put a price tag on that. You can't put a price tag on all the generosity that they had to us. And it was really nice, just having to come up to us and say, "Hey, I heard your bad joke of the week. It was really bad." And all the razzing that they gave me with the $40, I loved all that. I loved the jokes. I loved if I could have gave them just any moment of happiness, then I've done my job and then some. That's all I want to do. Just give them some enjoyment, some entertainment. This is the one you're gonna make me cry on, ain't it? Yeah. I'd have to break it down individually. I think, I think I'd want. I think I'd want Miss Jean to know. Gosh, you're gonna make me cry on this. Okay. I think I want Miss Jean to know that that I love her. Yeah. She was like goodness. She was like, Miss Jean was like a second mom to me, so I hope she knows I love her. I do appreciate everything she did for me. I appreciate her concern. She had a lot of concern about my life, and I appreciate that. As far as the others, I would want Michael J. Steele to know how much I admired him. I try to really pattern my early career after what he did. I always thought he was so creative and so funny, and he connected with the listener so well. And I always wanted to be like that. Sadly, Bud's not with us anymore, but and Bud never got to hear how much I appreciated everything he did. He took interest in me when I was just a young punk kid. I had not proved myself in radio. I never thought I was entitled to anything. Everything I did, I tried to earn everything I did. But Bud opened a lot of doors for me that I didn't know needed to be opened. He taught me how to write copy for commercials, and he gave me confidence so I didn't have any. So I hope his family knows, he meant a lot to me. He really did. Dale Gardner, he taught me a lot too. He doesn't know, how much I appreciate him. He has two wonderful sons, and they're very talented when it comes to radio themselves. But he took a lot of interest in me, and he helped me grow up a lot in radio. He helped me do a lot of things. I never could have done, the sports broadcasting that I've done now were not for him. He took a lot of interest in teaching me that, even when we didn't work together anymore. He came back and offered to show me how to do that, and I worked for him briefly at another radio station doing that. Dale Gardner, he did a lot for me. I really appreciate him. And I say the best for last. Dale Turner was just awesome. I cannot put into words what he meant to me. He was just he was always the cool older brother I wanted, but not just on the radio. We did things outside of radio. We'd go to Traveler games, had a lot of fun at the Arkansas Traveler games together. We did a lot of wrestling things and got to do a lot of ringside announcing together. We just had fun, and he showed me that radio was not just a job. It could be fun, and it should be fun, and it was a lot of fun with him. There were days that he wasn't having a great day, or days I wasn't having a great day, but he'd always find some way to make me smile, and he would show me that you didn't have to take it so seriously all the time, and because there was a lot of times I'm very OCD, I'm very driven, I want things done a certain way, and he would tell me it's okay, just to relax and take it easy. And he introduced me to a lot of the best parts of my life. A lot of the geek culture I love now I discovered through him. He was just a great guy. Those people out there were great. I worked with some really tremendous people, but those are some of the major people that affected my life, and I want them to know how much I appreciate it. I wouldn't be here today if not for any of them.